those to share their insights, vision, and expertise through conversations and discussions. Our previous sessions have each drawn huge audiences engaged for the whole hour of the discussion with lots of questions coming in. And I have to thank all of you for joining in such large numbers. Today we feature a leading brand expert and coach and best-selling author, Ambi Parameswaram. His latest book is Spring, I'll repeat that, Spring, Bouncing Back from Rejection. He will discuss this with Tata brand custodian and another brand expert, and who's the founder of this series actually, and author Harish Bhat. Sharing the session is well-known journalist Anuradha Sengupta. There's a Q&A at the end, and the 5 featured questions will get gift coupons from Tata Click. Before I hand over this whole session to Anuradha, let me say that we are going to launch this book right now. So here we go. Okay, good luck, and Anuradha, over to you.
Thank you, Anil. Ambi, I've known for a really, really long time because of a show that I created and hosted and ran for a very long time on CNBC called Storyboard. So I've had a chance to sort of track Ambi's career and interact with Ambi very often over the course of my running of Storyboard. So I'm delighted today to be able to have this conversation with Ambi as the author. And more importantly, I think the theme of this book, Spring, Bouncing Back from Rejection, is particularly resonant today. Because, I mean, it would be resonant at any point to each and every one of us, but in the times that we are living in, the kind of experiences that we are having as individuals, as businesses, as communities, I think to be able to deal with adversity and adversity very directly, meaning rejection and perhaps failure, is very, very critical. So Ambi, I'm delighted that you brought this book out. I think the timing is perfect. Harish, it's good to see you. I'm looking forward to all the insights that you'll bring on board, both as from the individual perspective as well as a corporate perspective. But before we get chatting, Ambi, I believe you've been very creative and working overtime. You want to show off that you have an advertising career past and you have some presentation that you're going to do for us. So go ahead, over to you.
Thank you, Anuradha. Thank you for hosting it. Thank you, Anil. Thank you, Harish, for being here. Thank you for giving me a chance. So I have a short presentation. It will take about 20 minutes, and then we'll be back to handing over the mic to Anuradha to moderate the discussion. Okay, so with your permission. Okay, so spring. What is a spring? Spring is a twisted piece of metal that when you push, pull, twisted, turn, it always bounces back to its original shape. And that's what gave me the idea that I should if I write a book, and this book should have a title of Spring. It also kind of fits in well with my previous book, which was called Sponge. So people already have been suggesting what should be the third book I should be writing, but let me get this book up and about. So we are living in tough times, and I think one of the important things we need to understand is how agile is our internal spring and how do we face rejection. So in the book, I've talked about a 3-step formula you can use for facing any kind of rejection. The first is be positive, but be ready to face rejection. The second step, learn to process rejection better. And the third step, learn from every rejection, and you will get better and better, even if you get rejected again and again. So over the next 15 minutes, I will take you through a few stories, some from my own life, some from lives of people I truly admire. So let me start with my own rejection story. In MBA B school, there's this whole paranoia about dream company and applying to a dream company. So once a dream company I had was Hindustan Lever, and I applied to Hindustan Lever after my IIT in March 1977. I was rejected. Lo and behold, Hindustan Lever came again to IIM Calcutta. So as a young summer intern, I wanted to get in. I applied. I was one of the top students. So I got shortlisted, and there were last 2 students. And in the last round, I blew it. Okay, at that stage, I said, I need to think back. And I sat and thought, and I said, what am I going to do for the next 2 months? I said, I should spend more time in Calcutta. So I started looking for a summer assignment in Calcutta. A fairly unknown agency at that time, Rediffusion, had put up a small notice in the notice board saying summer intern wanted. I applied. I got the summer internship with them, and that opened my eyes towards advertising and what a fantastic field it is. During the final placement, Hindustan Lever had come. I didn't apply. In fact, I had got a pre-placement offer with Rediffusion. I joined them, worked with them for 3 years, then worked in marketing for about 7, 8 years, and went back to advertising with FC Julka, where I was there for about 26 years. So that rejection got me into what I call redirection. And I started looking at a new direction, and I managed to, I think, build a career there. So when you get rejected, remember, there is always an option for you to first understand you can look at new directions and also understand what is the shade of rejection you're facing. Is it a real hard rejection or is it a soft rejection? Should you keep trying or should you give up? So that is a little bit of my story. Now let me go to someone who we really admire. The person I'm talking about is APJ Abdul Kalam. And in his book, he talks about how today we celebrate ISRO for all the great achievements they've done, very well deserved indeed. But you know that in August 1979, when they launched SLV-1, it was a failure. And Dr. Kalam talks about it, that he went through gut-wrenching feeling on facing this failure. And he had this inner critic shouting at him, saying that you shouldn't have done it, you made this mistake, etc., etc. But he had a great boss, Professor Satish Dhawan. Satish Dhawan did something fantastic. He told Dr. Kalam to sit in the back, and he faced the media. And he took all the brickbats. And a year later, in July 1980, when the SLV was successful, again, Professor Satish Dhawan put Dr. Kalam in front, and Dr. Kalam then faced the media. And of course, you know what happened. He went on to become President of India, numerous achievements, and probably the most loved person of this generation, Dr. Kalam. But he managed to silence his inner critic because he got the help of his boss. Now that's space scientist. Let's look at another field, authors. Zig Ziglar has said this, that there are probably hundreds of authors who will tell you thousands of stories of rejection before they got accepted. Jeffrey Archer, all of us love his books. Jeffrey Archer's first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, was rejected not less than 16 times. J.K. Rowling rejected 12 times. Jack Renfield rejected 144 times. And of course, Stephen King was rejected. Our own favorite, Amish Tripathi, was rejected numerous times. Beatles were rejected. Walt Disney was rejected. Seinfeld was rejected. James Bond was rejected. How do these creative people keep going at it? And I think the lesson there is, if you're creative, if you have the inner conviction that your creative work merits publication, I think you should keep trying. So we saw space scientists, we saw authors. What about the new emerging area, the so-called startup ecosystem? In the book, I've talked about a particular company called Saral Designs. They make machines which make good quality sanitary napkins. You won't believe it. They were rejected by 100 VCs. They went through a whole year making 2 presentations every week to different VCs and getting rejected. They were fortunate at the end of that 100, they managed to find a mentor who told them what they were doing wrong. And when they figured out what they were doing wrong, they managed to repurpose their entire strategy, and they used the mentor to pivot their strategy. And then the next 10 presentations, they got funding from 3 of the VCs they spoke to. In fact, Sohani Mohan then featured on the cover of Forbes, as you can see here. In advertising, Anuradha was telling you, I spent a long time in advertising, and you face rejection. You face multiple rejection. You pitch for a business, you don't get it. Your idea gets rejected. So the next story I'm going to tell is about how serendipity or God above helped us get into the Tata Motors business. We were invited to pitch. This was 97. Indian economy was opening up. A lot of new companies were coming. And we were invited to pitch for the Hyundai business. This was July 1997, I think. We flew down to Chennai, 6 of us, made a presentation. At the end of the presentation, while walking out, I was telling my colleagues, we have blown it. We've done a really lousy job. We didn't get the business. It went to, I think, Shastras, Sachi, who did a pretty good job. When we came back to Bombay, we said, look, what are we doing? How can we be so naive? What can we learn from this pitch? We realized that automotive sector is going to be extremely big in this country. And we didn't have an auto sector client worthy of giving us revenues. And we said, now we need to figure out how to break into this sector. We started reading up, and then we figured out that Tatas are going to launch their new car, started engaging with the Tata Motors team 6 months before they even called out for a pitch. They got involved in a case study competition we were conducting. And the pitch was called in June, I think May. The pitch happened in June. 14 agencies pitched for it, and we managed to land that account. And the lovely part of the story is the agency which won the Hyundai account, in fact, lost the account, I think, 7 years later, because Hyundai brought their own in-house agency, InOcean, into India. And fortunately for us, FC Bulka and I personally worked on the Indica, Indigo, Marina, a whole range of vehicles which Tata Motors launched, and the agency continues to work with. And so let me play an ad we created for Indica, which is one of my favorites.
When I saw you standing there, about fell out my chair. And when you moved your mouth to speak,
lift?
I felt the blood go to my feet.
Nice car.
Baby, I'd love you to want me the way that I want you, the way that it should be. Baby, I'd love you to want me the way that I want you, the way that it should be. Baby, you'd love me to want you the way that I want you.
Hello? Excuse me. Can you give me a lift?
Tata Indica, more dreams per car.
About that script that was actually written by Nitish Tiwari, young Nitish Tiwari then, was a copywriter. And of course, he later went on to build a great career as a movie director. And Dangal, which is the highest grossing Hindi movie, was directed by him. So what is the lesson? When you get rejected, sit back and figure out what you can learn from that rejection. We learned from the Hyundai rejection. We managed to get our act together for the Tata Motors rejection, and thank God for that. So when you get rejected, remember, what can you learn from that rejection? That's important. Now let's go to an area of sports. And do you know that in 1998, Rahul Dravid was dropped from the Indian ODI team? And what did he do? Was he moping around? Was he crying? Geet Sethi writes about this in his book. Within a week of him being dropped from the Indian team, he was out there in the Krantivira Stadium working with a trainer to develop his upper body muscles. Right? What happened next? Of course, record books will show that in 1999 World Cup, Rahul Dravid was the highest scoring batsman. Right? Viren Reskina, former Indian hockey captain, said this to me, that only in sports is there no permanent black mark if you get rejected or if you lose. So a lot of lessons we can learn from sportsmen. If you get dropped from a team, don't curse, just practice a little bit more. From sports, let me go to the area of academics. In academics, there is this whole concept called rejection resume. A lot of academics are pretty proud of saying, these are the things I got rejected. But in management, somehow we get very scared of talking about rejection. I think that needs to break. And when I used to interview candidates, I used to ask them, what are your 3 successes? And tell me, what are your 3 failures? And importantly, what have you learned from those 3 failures? That actually tells you a lot more about a person than his big bomb story that I launched this and I launched that. So write your rejection resume. Keep it ready. Probably you can learn more from your rejection resume than from your success resume. And in the academic field, again, there is this whole concept of peer-reviewed journals. It's damn tough to get an article through a peer-reviewed journal. There are scientists who have their hair pulled out because they got rejected multiple times. And interestingly, a professor in an American university shared this little bit with me that he's got, a lot of his papers have been accepted and they've been published. Initially, he faced a lot of rejection. But the interesting thing is, 6 of his best paper awards and best of paper awards were all papers which actually got rejected the first time. And he says that being rejected should be seen as a nice battle wound, and you can actually improve your work if you get rejected. So use each rejection to get a little better. Okay, and that's a lesson which I'd like to share with all of you there. Now coming to another favorite problem with advertising is that your idea gets rejected, right? And then you get into depression and the client doesn't understand it. And I was put in a similar situation. I was moved to Chennai to Mumbai in 1994 and I was told to handle this account. And I'm going to complete my tryst with Hindustan Lever here. So just hang in. I was told there is this account, brand called Santur. We got the account in 1989-90. We've done a great job, but now we are on a logjam. The agency believes that we should run this campaign, this particular creative execution. The client is dead set against it. Now you need to figure out how to solve this problem. So I met the client, I spoke internally with the agency, and I said, look, we need to think of this differently. And I kind of, what I called it reframing. So the client had taken a mortal aversion to the idea because the idea was called jazz. And they said, no, Indian women don't know jazz, blah, blah, blah. So the way I solved the problem, in a sense, was I said, look, we are convinced there is this idea which will work for you. You feel that is too dramatic. So let's give you something else which is a little more of your type. We will stick to the same theme, which is younger looking skin, mistaken identity. And we'll do 2 films. You decide which one to run, where. And let me play the ad and I'll tell you what happened.
वाह, इतनी खूबसूरत है। पहले कभी नहीं देखा इसे। Excuse me, कौन से कॉलेज में हो? कॉलेज? और मैं? मामी। इसकी त्वचा से तो उम्र का पता ही नहीं चलता। चंदन और हल्दी के गुण समाये संतूर, त्वचा कुछ और निखारे संतूर 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 संतूर।
The client is Wipro, and to be fair to Wipro, they tested both the options and they came back and said, yeah, what you guys recommended actually is working better. So we're going to shelve the other one and we're going to run this film. What happened is what case studies can be written about. When I started working on Santur, Santur was not even 1/5 the size of Lux soap. And last year, 2018, I think, Santur became the 2nd largest soap brand in the country. It overtook Lux. So I say, Hindustan Lever's loss is Wipro's gain, right? So remember, when you get rejected, it's always possible for you to reframe the offer. And when you reframe the offer, you may in fact taste success. Now, last 2 slides. And there is a big saying in this that if you've not been rejected, you have not, flown. You've not tried something which is dramatically different. And a life with no rejection is a life in itself. So please remember, rejection actually is a positive. And when you get rejected, you're trying to go beyond what people think you can do. But be ready. Build your internal resilience spring, because the opportunities are immense. But the young people today are too thin-skinned. They have to be ready to take risks. They have to see positive in every challenge, and they have to have a rejection processing system, maybe a mentor who can advise them. And you have to bring enthusiasm and energy in everything they do. Right? So all I can say is the book is all about is helping you become a super spring so you can bounce back after every challenge. And remember, the face, process, learn formula. So, and of course, Nelson Mandela said it better than anyone else. Do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got up back again. So that's it. Much more is there in the book. I've just given you a glimpse of what is there in the book. So I come back and I stop share and I hand over the mic back to Anuradha. I think we managed a smooth transition till now. Thank you.
Yes, Ambi, it was a good presentation, and you know how difficult I can be. So, no, that was really nicely done. So, thank you. Also, I think it will help people. Harish and I have read your book. So, what this presentation will do is allow this conversation to be more inclusive, so people know exactly what we're discussing. So, Ambi, well done. Thank you.
Thank you. That's like, in we have this. Tamil, we have this saying, Vashishtar Vayala Devarishi, which means, being called a Devarishi by Vashishta is the highest honor you can get.
Well said, Ambi, well said.
Yeah, Harish, let me start off the conversation with you because, I saw you, I know you read the book, I was watching you react to the presentation and I could see you sort of nod a couple of times. So clearly this is resonating. It certainly resonated with me. What is it in so many different aspects that came out that Ambi has touched upon that you felt is like, like just that arrow that hits the bullseye? What was it that resonated the most with you and your take on this issue?
Yes, so Anuradha, this is a beautiful book and I really enjoyed reading it. I couldn't put it down. I sat down on my chair and read it, Ambi, in about 3.5 hours with a few interruptions for eating, in fact. Two things resonated with me, Anuradha, in the book and in Ambi's presentation. One, never take rejection personally. There's an idea which is getting rejected, or there's a paper you have written which is getting rejected, or an article you write which gets rejected. It's not a rejection of you as a person. It's a rejection of something you have produced. And that's very important for all of us to bear in mind, particularly in today's difficult circumstances, I think, which are actually not of our own making, in a way, at least not directly of our own making. So that resonated very much with me, Anuradha, and it actually took me back to my school days when I began writing. I am very passionate about writing, and I used to submit articles and middles to newspapers from time to time, and out of 50 I would write, one would get accepted, and 49 would come back with a nice rejection slip from the editor saying, thank you, but we can't publish your piece. And I do believe in those very young days I used to take it personally. I used to say, maybe I can't write well enough. But then I learned that, there are pieces which also get accepted. The editor says, this is a good piece, we are going to publish it tomorrow. And so, that was a learning which came home to me very quickly from Ambi, that never take rejection personally. The second thing, Anuradha, that he said, which resonated a lot with me, is there is a learning in every rejection. And if you actually reflect on why something you did was rejected, that learning is very valuable in scaling up to the next level. And I have found that at repeated points in my career, every time there's been a rejection or a failure, there is a learning that one can take forward. These two are absolute wow moments for me in a beautiful book.
Mm. Ambi, I could see that you owe Hindustan Unilever a wealth of gratitude.
You're putting it very nicely, very nicely. Yeah, but I know that day when I got rejected by, I thought I'll get the summer internship, right? I was one of the toppers. Harish topped his class. I didn't top my class, but I was among the top students. And I thought I'll get it. So that day when I didn't get that summer internship, and for it was a trick question, which I answered in a stupid way. That night I didn't sleep too well, and some of my friends said, yeah, don't worry. So then I said, no, yaar, I need to think differently. Why am I, so bothered about getting into levers? Let me think of what else is there. And then I saw that little notice, and then, as they say, life.
Your path changed completely.
Yeah,
So I want this is a question for both of you. I think the way our system and our society has been arranged so far, rejection seems to be inbuilt at almost every step of our life, isn't it? Whether it's school, college, and I think it comes from a mindset of scarcity because there are so many of us, such few opportunities, so everything becomes funnel. You're constantly going through a funnel, and very few people emerge on the other side. So this kind of inbuilt rejections, especially at milestone moments, especially in the, on career paths, when young people set out on career paths, is it easy to dissociate yourself from your idea and your work? I mean, today, where you are in your career, both of you gentlemen, is very different from where, let's say, a 20-year-old, or a 22-year-old, a young adult is just where they're beginning to want to go into premier institutions or those jobs, right? So how easy is it really to dissociate yourself? What is that process that you could use? Harish, were you first?
It is not easy, Anuradha. It is a challenge. At the age of 20, at the age of 25, you're trying, or even at 17, 18, you're trying to get into college. You don't get into a premier institution, as you say, it's funneling down and then trying to get into a good job. But the simple process that one can follow to disassociate oneself from the rejection is also, Anuradha, look at all the things that even at that stage, every student and every young adult has done a number of things very well in his or her life. Sometimes, if you reflect on the things that you've done very well, your self-esteem comes building back, because I have done A well, B well, C well. I have done very well in my school, or I've done very well in my in my sports classes, or I've done very well in some other extracurricular sphere. I think that reflection on the things that you've done well brings your self-esteem back in very good measure. And the second is really to say, sometimes there's a certain line of learning that you want to pursue. And when you get rejected at that line of learning, sometimes it's also worthwhile sitting back and reflecting and saying, is there something else that I am so passionate about undertaking? Ambi talks about redirection in the book. At that age of 17 or 18, you have not reflected and come to a view that this is what I'm really good at that I want to do in life. And sometimes rejection makes you sit back and think, okay, maybe it's not that I want to do chemical engineering. Maybe I will be much better becoming a designer. And that kind of redirection in your mind is a very, very constructive way of taking your life forward. And Ambi's put that beautifully in his book.
Yeah, in fact, Ambi, you talk about a support network, and when Harish says that in order to be able to dissociate yourself from rejection, stroke, failure, you need to take pride in something else that you have in your life, right? It may not be an achievement, and I use the word achievement carefully in quotes, right? Because that's also relative. But you need to feel good about something about yourself and in your life. This is where the support system comes in, isn't it? This is where society, your family, your larger community of friends has to play a very vital role. And do you think Indian society and we as Indians are good at being supportive of people who are getting rejected?
And the honest truth is no. Okay, I think we as a society look down upon people who get rejected.
Yeah.
Right? And and I think we put tremendous pressure on our kids to perform. The problem is, I think we were discussing it with someone else the other day, and he made an interesting observation. He said, look, at least the IIT, IIM system, getting in is kind of pre-decided. Maybe when you do those mock tests, you're going to get in, you're not going to get in, you're kind of prepared. But once you get into a business school or get into an engineering school, you think you are the same as the other guy. And that's when it hits you that you want this project and you didn't get this project. Or you want this particular job, you didn't get this particular job. And I think somewhere, and I'm probably being extra critical here, somewhere the parents in India, especially among the higher socioeconomic class, are mollycoddling their children a bit too much. they're not preparing these children for rejection. And in fact, when my friends write to me saying, you enjoyed the book, I ask them, give it to your son and daughter, and get them to read it and let them, they are the real audience for this book. So let them say whether they found it interesting. And so I think we, this in China, they had this, little emperor syndrome, right? The children who are actually having 6 people looking after them, children who are children of a son or daughter of a one-child household, and their parents are children of one-child household. So they have 4 grandparents.
So Ambi, mollycoddling and the point you make, I get that. But also the fact is that when you get rejected, when you don't make it to that premier institute, when you don't crack the JEE, or whatever the milestone achievements are for young people, then it's very hard. Then your family doesn't mollycoddle you, right? Then you are made to feel really like a loser. Let's look at corporate India. Harish, we are talking at a time when so many companies are doing layoffs. Okay, if I got cut from my job, it's a clear rejection. I understand the macroeconomic situation is what it is. I understand companies are going to lay off people, but A didn't. And I did. So then what happens? Then how do I dissociate that? And here, this is not just about my esteem. It is about an existential crisis, isn't it? I need to have that livelihood to sustain my life, perhaps my family. So there, what can corporate India do to, I know it's a tricky situation, a tricky question, but I want you to have a go at it.
No, so I think what you're saying is right. This is a very difficult situation for the Indian economy, surely. But if anyone gets laid off, it's also a very, very difficult situation for them personally. There are 2 things here, Anuradha. One is, of course, it means livelihood. It's not just status, not just other connotations, but livelihood. And my belief is that each of us have a responsibility to ourselves to ensure that we reskill ourselves, we learn something new, and then we go back and ensure that we get the best possible employment, if that ever happens. I think that's a personal responsibility. And in today's day and age, there are skills which are highly in demand, and there are skills which are not so much in demand. So I think that reskilling responsibility lies with us, and that is a specific learning that we should be resilient enough to take forward. Having said that, one should understand that this situation, the COVID-19 situation, is not directly of our making. Somewhere mankind might have caused it by, destroying forests and all that. That's a different issue, but it's not directly of our making. So it's important to sit back and say, yes, even if I've been laid off or rejected in a sense, in the manner that you put it, this is not really of my own making. There are larger forces at play. I have achieved all this in my career over the past so many years. How can I now build on those strengths? How can I learn a few more skills in a few more months and then go back, roaring back into the job marketplace when things are, in all likelihood, things are going to improve. Things have already started showing some improvement. But having said that, it is a very, very challenging and difficult situation, and the support system there is equally important, Anuradha.
Yeah, I want you, Harish, I want both you and Ambi to talk a little bit about the support system for the individual, whether it's a young adult or a mid-career professional who's been laid off, whatever it is, because I think, I really hope, and I could be really wrong here, but I think the COVID lens that has been put onto our lives, and it's totally beyond us, I think will lead to some reassessment, maybe a little bit of kindness towards each other, and therefore a stronger support system, whether it's family, community, company. I want both of you to weigh in on that. You should be honest on the individual. I'm saying, what about the onus of handling rejection and coping with failure on the people around me, on my support and community, support systems and community?
Okay, so let me just talk for a bit and then I'll hand over to Harish. As a society, we've all been pretty unkind for people who get laid off. So the normal good old advice which one used to get was never resign your job till you have another job. Okay, the theory is that if you're without a job, no one is going to hire you. But I think that is going to change. And I think, good or bad, that's going to change, because people are going to say, look, he got laid off for no fault of his. There's nothing wrong with him, right? And we can go and look at him. And there's someone whom I referred to a company, and I said, look, he's been laid off, and that's there. They said, no, it doesn't matter. This guy has the skill sets. We still want to meet him, and hopefully he'll get the job, right? So I think as a society, hopefully we will reset this big black mark saying you get sacked. I mean, in India, if you get sacked or you get laid off, it's like, arey.
Matter of shame.
The family, parents will start crying, wife will cry, hey, whoa, and all of us, I can talk for myself. I've been in a situation where, I came home and said, this was happened when I was in Delhi, and I came home and told my wife, look, I think I should quit. She said, but you don't have a job. You have any other job? I said, no. But, tomorrow I'm going to talk to the director, and if he doesn't assuage me, I have my letter, I'm going to resign. So what do we do? I said, you keep your job, we'll figure out something. She said, okay, go ahead. You can't go through this kind of stress anymore. And I think today, your partner has to provide that comfort, saying, don't worry, don't worry, I'm there, taking off, I'm there. Similarly, the overall ecosystem has to change, has to say, so what if he is being laid off? He is very good talent. And I think what Harish said is right. If you've been laid off because of some reason that you don't have a particular skill, you reskill yourself, like, this whole redirection stuff which I talked about, reskill yourself and get yourself into a better place. And I hope that this COVID changes Indian society's perception about someone applying for a job who doesn't have a job currently.
Yeah. Harish, I want you to add on to this. And also, I think, I'm doing this conversation called the Media Dialogues these days on CNBC, and I've had business leaders from different sectors come in on the show. And I've noticed one thing, okay, and that is that the economy has been doing badly for a while now, okay, and everybody comes in and is very polite and skirts around it. But post-COVID, now that everybody's in the same boat and miserable and has been blindsided, everybody's world has been upended, everybody's a little more open and a little more candid about enumerating their lack of success. I'm not going to use the word failure, but their lack of success. And I like that. I think it will create a little more empathy. It'll create a little more honesty. And what Ambi said, this thing of, not being on the defensive because circumstances around you have changed. Give me a corporate perspective on this, Harish, please.
So there are two things, Anuradha, I want to say. First and foremost, you made a point earlier. I think this is a time to be kind. You have to get people to spring back. I think we have to somewhere put kindness on our to-do list. That kind conversation, that personal conversation, that reaching out to people, that is so important, because sometimes you just need to listen. Sometimes you can offer some advice. Sometimes you can offer suggestions on how a person should reskill herself or himself. So I think kindness, this is the time for kindness and empathy. But on the point you made just now, Anuradha, I think it's good, vulnerability.
Yeah, that's the word, absolutely.
Vulnerability is important. All of us as corporate professionals, as human beings, there is a vulnerability within us. And I think it is important, where appropriate, for that vulnerability to be displayed, to be emoted, to be talked about. Because at the end of the day, in fact, there is a recent TEDx talk that I heard on the power of vulnerability. Vulnerability makes you human. Vulnerability makes you resonate. There is nothing wrong at all in saying that in my career I have failed 18 times. I may have succeeded 45 times, but those 18 times have taught me more lessons than the 45 times where I have succeeded. And I believe there is in these moments of vulnerability or the moments of rejection sit very strong stories that we can use to actually tell younger people within the country who may be in fear of losing jobs or in fear of in the current situation, very vulnerable, saying that out of this vulnerability comes success. So I think corporate India, corporate leaders, everyone, including people like myself, vulnerability is very, very important, and it is good that the current situation is kind of eroding into the defensiveness that corporate India might have otherwise had.
Well said. I'm so happy to hear that. Ambi, I've sort of honed in, sort of zoomed into the individual, because I think that's where it really cuts this kind of rejection. But let's let's zoom back out and look at a collective in that sense, this is business Shastras, case studies, companies get rejected. Big ideas of business leaders have got rejected, not just on an individual level, but as a corporation, right? So you have any thoughts on that? And then same question to Harish.
Oh yeah, I go back to my favorite brand, Tata Indica, right? I mean, we launched it with a huge fanfare, and then it met with issues. Sales had completely plummeted to 1/5 of the level it was, and the company said, "No, I'm going to fix this." So same thing, they went and met customers, understood what had to be done, fixed all the problems.
Step in, because I think we've got an issue with. No, Ambi's back. Okay.
I'm back, right? Okay.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. So, they went, did the same thing I'm talking about, face, process, and learn, and they fixed the car, and we launched it as Indica V2. It became outstanding success, became the largest selling car in its class, overtook Zen, overtook Santro, and in fact, Harish has written a book called Tata Log, where one chapter is about the revival of Indica. Or take a look at Cadbury and the problem they had with their worm infestation, right? So they went, they listened to the customer, they figured out there's a
the packaging.
They fixed the packaging, they got Amitabh Bachchan to say, they're back to the bank. Or even recently, Maggie, their first response was very bad. They really stumbled with the ball for the first 6 months. But after that, Suresh, Narayan has come, they fixed the problem. They've come back to the bank, and I'm told they can't produce enough now. The demand has gone through the roof. So the same thing happens to companies, that you face rejection. How do you react? You keep dismissing it, saying, "No, competitor ka problem hai, competitors done this, government is against me, and that politician is against me." Or you say, "Look, there's something wrong with us, something wrong with the product, there's something wrong with the process, something wrong with what we are doing. Let's go back, let's study, let's fix it." And company after company after company has been able to manage consumer rejection and convert the rejection into rejoice. The consumer comes back. So I think what applies to individual, like what you said rightly, Anuradha, that applies in a bigger way, multiplied to the power of probably 100 to companies. And of course, Harish will tell you about the Tata stories.
Because you've been documenting the story. There's many stories, isn't it, Harish?
So I think I will use stories from the companies that I have been part of, Anuradha, because that's the best way of what I spoke earlier about vulnerability. And let me use 2 stories, one from my own career as a marketer and one from a brand that I have been part of. So for many years I was part of Tanishq, which is today India's most popular brand of jewelry. It's doing phenomenally well now, and many women across India today, Tanishq is their brand of choice. But we should remember that when Tanishq was launched, and Ambi would remember this, and so would Bhaskar, who's been my boss in Titan, for the first several years, Tanishq was rejected by Indian consumers, because when Tanishq launched, it was launched with only 18-carat jewelry. And then Mr. Xerxes Desai, who was the then managing director of Titan, and the entire team redirected their energies towards creating a brand which would get accepted by Indian consumers, introduced 22-carat jewelry, introduced the carat meter, and from there on, Tanishq has gone to become a huge success, inventing new tales of tradition. So the most popular brand of jewelry in India today, a brand of the Tata Group, was rejected not for 1 year or 2 years, but for 6 or 7 years at the start of its voyage. But a more personal story goes back to the beginnings of my time as a marketer, Anuradha. I used to be in Tata Tea as a young assistant manager marketing at that stage, and Tata Consumer Products, of course, is a big and very successful company today, which is the successor company. So I was in Bangalore, and I was asked to launch a brand of Assam tea, and we launched a brand which doesn't exist anymore called Brahmaputra tea. It's a brand, Brahmaputra standing for Assam. We launched that brand and we positioned it based on the fact that this is all tea from Assam. It didn't work with consumers. And my significant learning from that is that product attributes only work to a certain extent. It's eventually the benefit that consumers are looking for. What is the product benefit? So eventually when I launched two other brands, Chakra Gold Tea as well as Tata Tea Agni, we positioned it on product benefit as a learning from that. We said Agni is a strong cup of tea, and Chakra Gold brings you golden taste, Tangamana Rusi, as we say in Tamil. So there was a direct learning, and in the case of Tanishq went on to flourish, but in the case of Brahmaputra, we had to withdraw the brand. But those learnings were very, very useful in my career as a marketer. In subsequent launches that I did, which were very successful for Tata Tea, the company. So every marketer, I'm sure, has gone through phases like this, Anuradha, in his or her life, and we should actually take pride in those phases and pride in what we have learned out of those phases. Actually, I was reflecting on these stories as I read Ambi's book. That's what's beautiful about Ambi's book. It makes you reflect on these points of rejection and failure in your life in a very constructive way, as I'm sure it will do for every reader who is a part of the audience today.
Thank you.
Talking about readers and people in the audience, I am happy to say that people have been very attentive, and Amy and Anil, they've picked 5 winners or winning questions. They're winning questions, so they are going to be really good. So the first question is from Jinal Shah. Jinal Shah says, when we face a series of rejections in our pursuits, how do we know we are not throwing good money after bad? So Jinal Shah says, when we face a series of rejections in our pursuits, how do we know we are not throwing good money after bad? I guess she wants to know, when do you say, okay, no more, move on, like, Brahmaputra, the tea, when do you say that, okay, time to pull this off?
So let me answer that, and then I think Harish will have his take on this.
Do that,
The example of the Saral design, they went and pitched to 100 VCs.
Yeah.
So, when they came and, met me and we were talking, I said, look, why did you not stop? Why did you, after you got 20 rejection and some other ideas, and they are, they're very upset with the kind of ideas which were given to them, and, some of the VCs even made them spend money. I said, look, why did you not stop after 20, after 10, or after 40? They said, no, we were caught up in that, and we kept going at it. And they said very true. They said, look, we wish we had stopped and taken a 1 month pause and met 4 or 5 people and then decided what to do. So very often when you get rejected, you keep trying more and more, but maybe what you're doing is wrong. So one, maybe you have tunnel vision, which means you stop. You need to talk to someone who's not so closely involved with your problem. Maybe they can give you advice on what you're doing. Or the opposite, of course, is artists, right? I mean, someone like Amish Tripathi, who got rejected. And I still remember he met me as a young marketing manager with a copy of the book, which he decided to print it himself. Because he had such courage of conviction that he printed 1,000 copies and it got sold out in a month. Not even a month, in a week. And then all the publishers went running to him saying, we want to buy that. So if you have that courage of conviction, then go ahead and do it. Right? Otherwise, talk to someone who will give you dispassionate advice, saying, look, this is not going to work. Please stop. Don't waste your time. Right?
Harish? Do you want to weigh in on the same question? When do you know you've got to pull the plug?
So I just want to bring a marketer's perspective to that, Anuradha, and I want to say that one of the best things to do if you're faced with the rejection of some new product that you've launched or some new service you've launched is to actually have a chat with consumers. Sometimes the most simple answers you get are from consumers. They tell you your product sucks, or they tell you your product's very good, or you make this change and it'll work. And we should not get caught up as marketers, in the rarefied air of our conference rooms.
Yeah.
Go down to your distributors, go down to the market, talk to a few consumers, and that is what will give you either the reassurance that you can redirect and move forward, or that you have to call it a day. That's what I'd like to add to what Ambi said.
Okay, the second question.
I have one other point to add.
Yeah, go ahead, Ambi.
Okay. So if you're in the creative profession and if your idea gets rejected by one client, have a bottom drawer and keep that idea in that bottom drawer. Don't throw it away. Now, I've written a nice little story about Paul Vinod and the campaign.
Go back to it at some point. You never know when the time is right for it.
Yeah, maybe you can sell it to a different client if required. But in the case of Titan Edge, the original campaign, I think Titan Slim, the idea was rejected internally. So Paul Vinod kept it in his bottom drawer, literally bottom drawer. And when the global creative director came, he showed it and he said, this has to be shown to the client. They took it to the client. I think Harish was there or Bhaskar was there. They approved it in 1 minute. That campaign ran super print TV. It went on to win awards and went on to, sell. You're wearing a Titan Slim, is it?
Edge. I love it. I cannot tell you how much I love the Titan Edge. I mean, I have several.
So Anuradha, you're singing the music of my heart. Titan Edge, very, very close to me. I have worked in that company for over a decade. So
you should be able to recognize this then. Anyway, look, I think we should stop being a mutual admiration society at this point and go to the next question, okay? So there is the next, the next winning question comes from Vijay Rao. I think we've tackled this, okay, Mr. Rao or Ms. Rao, I'm not sure. But because your question is, springing back involves separating what you did from what you are. How does one do that? So I think we've got an answer to that. But Harish, Ambi, if any one of you want to add something, do it now. Otherwise, we'll move to the next question.
Ambi, up to you.
I think Harish spoke about it, which is don't take it personally. When you get rejected, you are not rejected, but your idea is rejected, or your project is rejected, or your proposal is rejected. So learn to distance yourself a bit from what you're rejecting. And I have narrated a nice story which I read in a Tamil book, which I think Vijay Rao, if I know who it is, Vijay will read it in the book and he'll figure it out. Okay, thank you, Vijay, for that question.
Okay. The next question is from Sumati Sridhar. And the question is, why does something get rejected? Is it bad idea or bad execution? Also, how does one take continuous rejection without losing confidence in oneself? Great question.
So Anuradha, let me take a stab at it, if you're fine.
Sure, go ahead.
There are so many reasons something can get rejected, Anuradha. The idea may have some gaps, which is true, or it may be that the idea is not suitable to the client on the other side or to the consumer on the other side. It may be a perfectly good idea being pitched to the wrong person, which could also be true. Like Ambi has pointed out in his book, it may sometimes be because the person who's listening to your idea has had a bad day and doesn't really want to give adequate mind space to your idea. Then that could also be a simple reason that an idea is rejected. Or an idea could be rejected because, like Ambi said, its time has not come. And when its time comes, like Victor Hugo said, it will be the most powerful thing on the face of the earth. So that's my answer to the first part of the question. The answer to the second part of the question, Anuradha, is like Ambi has said, get a dispassionate view from someone on why that idea has got rejected, so that you can distance yourself from the idea, and you then know that it's an idea being rejected because of reason A, B, C. It's not a rejection of your capabilities and skills. So that would be my response to the second part of the question.
Okay. Ambi, you want to weigh in, or should we move to the next one?
No, let me try and answer this, because I think sometimes you need to get to understand why it got rejected. Like I told in the Santur case, right? I still feel it got rejected because the agency gave that idea a fancy name, Jazz. If they had given the name Health Club, the client might have said, Health Club to chote mote.
Relatable.
Yeah. So maybe that was a simple. So you have to figure out, is there a tactical mistake you made? Can you reframe the problem? By reframing it, you may be able to get better acceptance, right? So I think maybe you're too close to it. Maybe you need to get someone else to advise you, right? That is it a problem with your idea? Is it a problem with the way you presented it? Or is it a problem with the person who was looking at it? The guy doesn't know that how it will work out, which is why, agencies do all these tricks, right? You make a storyboard, and sometimes you make a nice animatic film and show it to the client. Sometimes you go and shoot a rough film and what you call a scratch film and show it to the client. The client doesn't understand it. And I still remember we had a fabulous creative director in our Bangalore office called Indu, and she used to go and she used to present beautifully because she had seen I like Padamsi presenting. So he used to present beautifully. As a result, the clients used to watch out. They say, look, Indu, will the final film be as good as your presentation? And we all used to laugh, but that's true. How you present your idea is as important as your idea itself. How you present your proposal.
Very well said.
Yeah. Okay. The next question is from Storytelling Corp Krishna, who asks, again, we've addressed some of these, but I think there's no harm in reiterating. How does one create an ecosystem of well-wishers when as a country we're all running towards successful individuals? I mean, look at the media, right? We celebrate only success. We look at this awful tragedy of the actor Sushant Singh Rajput's suicide. We didn't even want to accept that he was actually dealing with mental issues and needed help and whatever else. So I think we just want to deal with success. We're not interested in people who have failed. We are not interested in people who've retired. We're not interested in people who've exited from companies and started out on their own, because sometimes you feel they don't have that sheen or that power anymore, isn't it?
So Anuradha, creating a circle of well-wishers does not happen in a day or two. I think it takes time. I would say there will be different circles. There will be an inner circle of well-wishers who will probably be your family, your very close friends, which would be cultivated over a very, very long period of time, which is why I think having that support system with your family or with your very close friends is very important. There would be an outer circle of well-wishers who would be professional colleagues whom you have worked with for a long period of time, and to whom you have added value also over a period of time. So it's always a two-way street. And then that creates a circle of trust and people wanting to wish well for each other. So that's the second. And the third, of course, Anuradha, is I think in an outer circle would also sit counselors, professional counselors to whom you go and address your issue, and they give you professional advice. In a sense, therefore, they are also your well-wishers because they're giving you professional advice on how you can progress. So how do you construct these concentric circles of well-wishers is, I think, something which takes time and happens over life, but it's never too late to start. You can start today and you will construct that circle for the future.
And do it consciously. Do it consciously. Identify these people, nurture these relationships, right? Yeah. Okay, yes. I'm going to tag on to this question, another winning question that's from Akshay Kumar. Ambi, listen to this question. I think you will be able to address this one along with that, right? So, Akshay Kumar says, it's not just parents. Look at the kind of marks students get today. 99% is not good enough. 99.5 plus gets you... only 99.5% plus gets you anywhere. A sense of rejection begins there. How
is that, whether it is because of upbringing or whether it is because of role models that you look up to or any other reason,
or your own personality and your own mental makeup,
your own personality and your genetic makeup, so to say, doesn't matter. Whichever of these reasons they are, I think some of the prescriptions that Ambi gives in his book, Spring, are equally valid. And those prescriptions are really to distance yourself from the rejection. Don't take it personally. Okay? Understand whether you have to redirect yourself or still move forward with whatever you're doing, even after rejection. understand what your learnings are from that so that you can improve the next time and you stand every chance of your idea getting accepted the next time. So the ideas in Ambi's book, I think, are agnostic of what the reasons are for the rejection in the first place. And that is why, Anuradha, I've really enjoyed reading this book, Spring. The last point I want to make is, these reasons, what are the deep-seated reasons why rejection is happening? That, I think, Anuradha, is a matter of reflection for each of us in our own lives, and it may be a different reason for each one.
Right. Ambi, I think we should give you the closing word on this conversation. You've deserved it. You've earned it.
So let me answer the question, and then I'll thank all of you. Is this the way you understand rejection, the way you process rejection? Is it something which is hardwired into you? Is it something you learn from your parents? Is it you learn from your bosses? I think it's a very good question. I think it's a mix of all this, right? Some of us have worked with mentors who taught us how to handle rejection. Some of us come from families where, we were told, I remember my grandfather telling me, don't read so much, you'll go mad. I mean, so you brought up in families, you had mentors doing it, but what Harish said is right. I think it's finally up to you. It is your internal spring. You cannot blame your father, your grandfather or grandmother. You can't blame your boss. You can't blame your colleague. The spring is yours. You have to look at your internal spring. You have to see how to make your internal spring more agile. You have to apply whatever little bit I've tried to put in my book in terms of how to handle rejection, in terms of facing it, processing it, and then learning from it. So don't take it as an excuse that, I've been taught to handle this way. I've been taught to cry after I, get rejected. No, there's nothing hardwired there. You can learn. You can change that. You can change your program. It's not as if God has written it into your genetic code and sent it. No, you can change. Some of the people who used to take the harshest criticism, from me, who used to even cry in my room, have later come and given me shouting. Same person, a year later, standing and saying, this is wrong, what you're doing is wrong. I said, okay, great. I mean, she's grown, right? I mean, this is fantastic. Right? So
people to change, yeah.
Absolutely, okay. It's possible to change. So thank you very much, Anil, Harish, for allowing me to present the book here. Thank you, Anuradha, in your busy schedule to take time out to anchor this.
I enjoyed it, Ambi. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuradha. Wonderfully moderated. And thank you, Ambi. It's been such a pleasure being with both of you on this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank all of you. Ambi, most of all, for writing the book and your great presentation. Harish Bhat, for all your insights, which is nothing less than what we expected from you. And Anuradha, you conducted this so well and so charmingly and brought out so many interesting points. I think I learned a lot myself, and I wish I'd listened to this many, many years ago. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining in today, and keep track of us. The Tata Literature Live Business Shastras will be back again quite soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.